Hello and welcome back to Let's Celebrate, a Holiday Origins podcast. I'm your host, Rusty Brown, and today we're celebrating Beltane, also known as Walpurgisnacht or May Day. And for me, it's always just been the day I was born. This is the podcast where each episode I research a specific holiday and discuss the history behind it, how the people before us celebrated it, how it evolved into what we celebrate now. And for this season, since the holidays I will be discussing are older holidays that haven't been popular celebrated in the recent past, I will be discussing how people have been reconnecting to these holidays and how we can incorporate these traditions and celebrate these old holidays in a new way. In hopes that everyone can reconnect to these holidays despite their religious or spiritual backgrounds, so that we can reconnect to the earth and its seasons to maybe heal the earth and possibly even find some healing within ourselves. Each episode also includes a CeLibation, that's a themed cocktail with a mocktail option to go with the holiday that you can make at home to celebrate along with me as you listen. The CeLibation for this episode is a frozen mango rum CeLibation. And I chose this for this episode because I currently have an abundance of mangoes. Our neighbors have a mango tree that hangs into our yard, and it's literally been raining mangoes. You can actually substitute the mangoes for any other seasonal fruit that you might have available. Strawberries are another fruit that you might be getting in abundance soon, depending on the area you're in, and they would be just as tasty in this recipe. To make the mango puree, I just put ripe fresh mangoes in the blender and put them in ice cube trays in the freezer so that they're ready to be made into frozen cocktails and smoothies whenever I so desire. So for this CeLibation, you need 3 cubes of the frozen mango puree, that's about 2 to 3 ounces I would say, and juice from half a lime, 1 ounce of rum and sparkling water, and then Tajin we're going to use to garnish. So you're going to add the frozen mango puree, the lime juice, rum, and sparkling water in a blender and then blend until smooth. Then you're going to rim your glass with the lime wedge and dip the glass in the Tajin to rim it and garnish with a lime wedge. And enjoy! Very refreshing. I can't even taste the rum. It's pretty dangerous. If you want a mocktail CeLibation to celebrate along with me today, then you can omit the rum and add 2 ounces of orange or apple juice, or really any other juice that you prefer. So last month's episode was about the spring equinox or Ostara, and if you listened to that episode and decided to incorporate some new or old but new to you traditions into your celebrations, I'd love to hear about how you celebrated. Did you incorporate eggs into your celebrations? Did you try some hot crust buns? Did you spend time with loved ones? You can email me at letscelebratepodcast@gmail.com with your celebratory stories. I've also created an Instagram page that you can follow me, and that is at Let's Celebrate Podcast on Instagram. And I have a YouTube channel if you prefer to listen to the episodes on YouTube. That is youtube.com/@letscelebratepodcast. So please like, subscribe, leave a review, all the things that, is supposed to help with the podcast. For me, for Ostara, it's been really hot here. So for the spring equinox and the surrounding days, I spent a lot of time in water. I went to the beach, to the lake, and I even bought a little swimming pool for myself, for my house, and I've also planted several different seeds, and they've already started to bloom, which is exciting to witness. I also started to do meditations and journaling on the growth I'm wanting to see in my own life over the coming year, which I'm still continuing to do. This is really what I find so interesting about celebrating the Wheel of the Year festivals, is about taking time to appreciate the change in nature and letting that change inspire change and motivate actions in my own life to help me learn to thrive through the seasonal change just as nature does. As I'm learning how to celebrate these Wheel of the Year holidays, that's what I'm trying to do, is just remind myself that I am part of nature as well. Just as the trees have an abundance of leaves, just as the earth, the ground has an abundance of grass, I too am a loved child of an abundant universe. So, on to this episode's holiday, Beltane, which also happens to be, as I said, my birthday, and is also known as Walpurgisnacht and May Day. And it happens on April 30th is the eve, and May 1st is the actual day of Beltane. But many people celebrate nowadays on April 30th on the evening. I did do an episode last year on Beltane with more of a focus on Walpurgisnacht, so be sure to listen to that episode for more info about those holidays. And this episode might be a little redundant, but I tried to add in some more things, and this is more focused on solely Beltane since we're focusing on the Wheel of the Year holidays for this season. So we'll start with the history behind Beltane. Beltane is the halfway point between the spring equinox and the summer equinox, and it's a celebration of the middle of spring and the coming of summer. It's known as a cross-quarter holiday on the Celtic Wheel of the Year. It's one of the original Gaelic seasonal festivals that now make up the Wheel of the Year. And I think I've mentioned in past episodes that the equinoxes and solstices were added to the Wheel of the Year in our more recent past, and the original Gaelic festivals take place at the midpoints between the equinoxes and solstices and are the days that the ancient people would have commonly celebrated instead of the equinoxes and solstices. I think there are cultures that did celebrate the equinoxes and the solstices, but the Wheel of the Year is mainly based off of the Gaelic or Celtic Wheel of the Year. So they mainly focused on the cross-quarter holidays like Beltane, Samhain, Imbolc. So Beltane is generally celebrated on the night of April 30th and the day of May 1st, which is why in some cultures it's called May Day. This is the time of the year when the earth is fertile again and the earth is abundant with life. It's connected to the autumn festival Samhain, which is our modern day holiday Halloween, that's celebrated on October 31st and November 1st. Beltane is exactly 6 months from Samhain and is considered the Halloween of spring in some cultures today. It is believed that the veil is thinner between our world and the underworld on this day, just as it is believed to be on Halloween. But instead of celebrating death or the dead souls, it's celebrating life and the unborn souls. The first reference to Beltane is from the 10th century from a text written by the Irish bishop King Cormac called Cormac's Glossary. And in this text, he explains that Beltane is a celebration of the beginning of summer and was celebrated on May 1st. And ancient people believed that a day started at dusk, so this is why many holidays are also celebrated on the eve or night before. It also mentions that Druids build bonfires that they would have livestock pass through to bless them. Beltane is an ancient Gaelic Celtic fire festival. So to the ancient Gaelic Celts who were herdsmen, Beltane marked the beginning of a new livestock cycle. It was the time of year when the cattle would be moved to their summer pastures. So many of the rituals and celebrations for Beltane involved blessings and protecting the cattle during this transition. So now let's take a look at how Beltane was celebrated in the past. The most important part of ancient Beltane celebrations was the bonfires, since Beltane is a fire festival after all. The bonfires are the star of the show. Beltane means fires of Bel in Celtic, after Belinus or Bel, the Celtic sun god. The ancient Gaelic Celts used the fires as part of their rituals. Many of rituals involved protecting the cattle, people, and crops, and encouraged growth and fertility. They would lead the cattle in between two large bonfires, and people would jump over the fires to protect the livestock from natural and supernatural forces. It was also believed that couples who jumped over the fires would improve their fertility. As part of the ritual, people would take embers from the Beltane bonfire back to light the fire in their own homes. This was said to protect them and their livestock, as well as contribute to fertility and growth of the entire homestead. The flames, smoke, and ashes of these bonfires were all believed to hold protective powers as well. A big reason why many of the Beltane celebrations focused on protection and promoting fertility is because it was thought that this time of year is the perfect time for women to conceive a child, since they would be able to still work in the garden or farm and take care of animals, and then they would be able to give birth after the harvest season, which is a traditional time of rest for the ancient people. And since the ancient people believed that the veil is thinner between the living and the dead during Beltane, they also believed that the Aos, or the fairies, or nature spirits, or the old gods were especially active at this time of the year. This is why they felt the need to protect their livestock and homes from illness, curses, or any evil forces. To appease the spirits, they would leave offerings at ancient fairy forts, wells, and other sacred places for the nature spirits to ensure a successful growing season and to receive blessings. A customary offering from the medieval period was to leave out offerings called onkenschnitt, which is bread spread with butter and honey to ward off the fae or evil-spirited fairies. During the medieval period, it also became traditional to hang sprigs of foliage and to use yellow mayflowers to decorate doors, windows, barns, and livestock. This was a symbolic way to fill the home with the colors and life of the natural world. Hawthorn trees and other thorn trees were considered sacred at Beltane and would be decorated with paper ribbons, dried flowers, bright shells, rushlights, and other natural offerings as an ancient fertility or abundance custom. Dancing around a maypole is a tradition that's been celebrated throughout history, and it actually started with people dancing around the decorated thorn trees. This tradition is believed to be a relic from days when people worshipped trees, because trees were believed to have a spirit that dwelled in them, and the spirit would bless the people and their homes who decorated them. The more common tradition of the maypole has been celebrated at least since the 1350s or 1400 AD, and involves a tall pole decorated with garland, ribbons, and flowers that people dance around. This tradition was mostly celebrated in Germanic Europe and Scandinavia. Visiting holy wells was also an ancient way to celebrate Beltane, probably because of the fairies, and also collecting the Beltane morning dew and splashing it on your face was said to maintain beauty and youthfulness. So you could wake up and rub your face in the dew to become more beautiful this May Day. In several parts of the world, Beltane is considered to be a night when witches go out. It was believed that witches would do a protective ritual before setting out to the highest point in their area to dance in a circle around a bonfire. There isn't any recorded history of what actually went on, and it's more of speculation and stories passed down through families that's kept this legend alive. Walpurgisnacht in Germany is considered witches' night, but originally it's more about keeping the witches away rather than consorting with them. You can listen to my Walpurgisnacht and Beltane episode from last year to hear more details about that holiday. There were a lot of legends surrounding this night that included devil worship and other things, so I did a more deeper dive in that episode, so go ahead and listen to that. So, how do people celebrate today? One of the biggest modern Beltane festivals is on Calton Hill in Edinburgh, Scotland, and it starts at sundown at the National Monument that's referred to as Acropolis. and the May Queen leads a procession followed by the Green Man and other costume characters. Everyone goes anti-clockwise around a path to the beat of drums that symbolize the moving towards summer. It ends with a stage performance where the May Queen and Green Man light a huge bonfire to spark the birth of summer. In many areas today, Beltane celebrations include fireworks shows, singing folk songs, and enormous bonfires. And some people burn wooden witches to symbolically scare the witches away. And lovers still jump over the fires together when it's died down to bless their fertility, and this practice is called the corn jump. Many people also still practice the maypole custom with a pole placed in a field with ribbons attached, and each person, usually women or girls, grab a hold of a ribbon and dance around the pole in a special way so that they weave the ribbon into a specific pattern. This is also considered a fertility ritual. Floral wreaths and weaving flowers into the hair is a beautiful way people adorn themselves for the celebration of Beltane today. And May baskets are also filled with flowers and goodwill and are given to people in need of care, such as elderly friends or someone who is recovering from an illness. And in my Beltane and Walpurgis episode I did last year, I talked more about how other cultures celebrated April 30th and or May 1st, so be sure to listen to that episode for more info about those holidays, because there are cultures throughout the world who celebrate April 30th or May 1st, even though they don't call it Beltane. So you can listen to that episode to find out how other cultures celebrate these days. So now let's look at how we can incorporate these traditions to celebrate Beltane today. Obviously, you have to have some kind of fire incorporated since it is a fire festival. You might see if your local area is having a festival for Beltane, May Day, or Walpurgisnacht that includes a bonfire. And if you can't find something, you can always make a fire at home. If you have a fire pit or another safe place to do that, please fire responsibly. If you don't have a place to make a responsible fire, you could burn a candle or a tea light for a little mini bonfire. You can also adorn yourself in the season by making a flower crown or wear flowers in your hair. This could be a fun activity if you plan to celebrate with friends this year. And as with all of these Wheel of the Year holidays, going out in nature is a great way to simply celebrate. Take a walk, pick some flowers, smell the new smells. Beltane's about the change of the season and the new life, so take a moment to notice that the world's actually coming back to life, and just notice the changes that are happening around you. Here in Guatemala this week, the rainy season started just in time for Beltane, so I've been noticing all the new smells that are associated with that, like the beautiful earthy, wet smell that lets you know that the rain's about to begin. I've also woke up the past 2 mornings to a very lovely floral smell that I haven't figured out what flower it's coming from. It's incredibly fragrant, almost like a perfume, and it's been a really pleasant way to wake up. While you're spending time in nature, you might look for a tree that speaks to you and decorate it with paper ribbons, dried flowers, and other natural decorations. And as you're decorating the tree, focus on the abundance of life, because as I kind of mentioned at the beginning of this episode, we are like the tree with its plethora of branches and leaves. The universe will also provide for us if we allow it to, and give thanks for all that you receive through this meditation. Many of the other Wheel of the Year holidays focus on harvest and seem to be more about death, but Beltane is more centered on being alive and the unborn, celebrating fertility, birth, new life, with the focus on humans and the animals that keep us alive. So take time to give thanks for life, and being alive is also a great way to celebrate this holiday. And since this time of year is focused strongly on fertility and sex, maybe look at what that means to you personally and do something that brings you to reclaim and reconnect to your own personal sexual energy. I'm not going to get into that here right now, but there are a lot of other content creators who are sharing ways that you can do this. And since Beltane's a time of growth in life, you can take some time to meditate on what the changes and growth that have happened over the past year have looked like for you. It might be a fun thing to journal about your progress so that next year you can look back on your growth, start a new personal tradition to reflect on the past year. Since Beltane is on my birthday, I always end up doing this, but I've never really intentionally meditated on the changes or journaled about it. It's just kind of, something like, oh, another year's passed, and I just think about it. But I think this year I'm going to incorporate this into my morning journaling routine and add it to my Beltane celebrations for this year. So that wraps it up for this episode. I'll be back in May to finally do that much anticipated Wheel of the Year episode. I keep hyping and still haven't put out, but I swear that I'm going to do it in May because the next Wheel of the Year holiday will be in June. So that leaves May open for me to do an episode. Before I get to the outro, I did find a Beltane blessing that was a Scottish Gaelic song collected by the 19th century folklorist Alexander Carmichael that I thought would be a nice way to end this episode. It is in Gaelic, but I have the English translation, so to save your ears from me trying to figure out how to pronounce Gaelic words, I'm just going to pronounce it, or I'm just going to say it in English. The Beltane Blessing. Bless, O threefold, true and bountiful, myself, my spouse, and my children, my tender children, and their beloved mother at their head, on the fragrant plain at the gay mountain Shaling, on the fragrant plain at the gay mountain Shealing. Everything within my dwelling or in my possession, all kine and crops, all flocks and corn, from Hallow Eve to Beltane Eve, with goodly progress and gentle blessing, from sea to sea and every river mouth, from wave to wave and base of waterfall. If you've enjoyed this episode and want to hear more, please like and subscribe, maybe even leave a review. Do you live somewhere that celebrates Beltane or May Day, or maybe even Walpurgisnacht? I would love to hear your celebratory stories. Feel free to send me an email at letscelebratepodcast@gmail.com, and don't forget to follow me on Instagram at letscelebratepodcast and YouTube at youtube.com/@letscelebratepodcast. As always, all of my references are in the show notes if you're interested in reading more about the history of Beltane and the other holidays I've discussed. Thanks for listening and joining me on this adventure. Have fun celebrating, and I hope you've learned something new today. Bye!